On this episode of Women Behind Bars, one woman pleads guilty in the group slaying of a religious family.
Based upon the evidence, they were preparing to go across country, robbing and killing people.
I just screamed, please don't hurt them, please don't hurt them. Ah, please don't hurt them, please don't hurt them.
Then LaSonya Larry tells her story. She confessed to the stabbing death of her live-in boyfriend.
He was standing there naked in front of me. He was like, you wanna have sex? I was like, no, I'm not having no sex.
There's a pattern of doing drugs and stabbing all their boyfriends.
2 women, 2 brutal murders. These are the stories of Natasha Cornett and LaSonya Larry. On April 6, 1997, the bullet-riddled bodies of 34-year-old Vidar Lilylid, his 28-year-old wife, Delfina, and their 2 young children were found along a road about a mile from Interstate 81.
They were devoutly faithful and humble people who were shot to death for their car.
Vidar and Delfina were already deceased when police arrived. 6-year-old Tabitha and 2-year-old Peter were helicoptered to a local hospital, where Tabitha was pronounced dead the following day, and Peter remained in critical condition.
This is one of the worst murders that I've ever witnessed in the last 30 years.
Within days, 18-year-old Natasha Cornett and 5 friends were arrested as prime suspects in a case that would make national headlines.
She was the one that was practicing satanic worship. She is the person that created the events that came together on that April the 6th of 1997.
One of the statements we retrieved from a young girl, Natasha had called her and told her they were going to start Armageddon.
If she's been going to kill anybody, she should have killed me.
Was Natasha Cornett the ringleader of a hateful satanic cult, or was she simply with the wrong crowd at the wrong time? Natasha Cornett grew up in a small, devoutly religious mining town in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains.
It's a very beautiful scenery to grow up in, but it's a suffocating place to live.
She had energy to burn. She liked to draw, to read. She loved dogs and babies.
As a young student, Natasha earned top grades in her class. But when she was in middle school, she awoke one morning to find that her mother, now divorced, had overdosed with prescription drugs.
My mom was on the bed, naked, with a bottle of pills laying next to her. I didn't know she was dying.
Natasha, I know it did something to her.
It messed with me.
Although Madonna Wallen recovered, Natasha began a downward spiral of antisocial behavior.
Started cutting things out of my diet. The less I eat, the better I felt. It was the one area that I did have control of.
She lost 30 pounds in 1 month.
To make matters worse, relations between mother and daughter became increasingly volatile as Natasha continued to act out.
I used a belt one time and the buckle slipped from my hand and it hit her on the back of the leg, but it made a bruise on her.
On the advice of a doctor, Natasha was admitted to Charter Ridge Behavioral Health System in Lexington.
The center found her to be a danger to herself and others, yet they just released her after 11 days.
Diagnosed as bipolar, she continued to see a counselor, but felt she did not get the care and attention she needed from adults in her life.
In the 7th grade, she just started changing the clothes, the big baggy pants, the big shirts. She wore a rope with the emblems, hanging. Everybody thought it was weird.
I started drinking and smoking and associating with people that were weird. You didn't have to be perfect around them.
In high school, Natasha continued to feel like an outcast and banded together with like-minded friends, the closest of whom was Karen Howell.
Karen was my life raft. She was the only person that understood me and let me be me. She knew my pain.
She had went through the same stuff.
Teens like Natasha, they have a thrill-seeking personality and need that stimulation because just sitting around leading a normal life feels boring to them.
Karen and Natasha started dabbling in dark activities that would eventually build into a cult-like behavior.
Everything that we did, though it was very destructive, it was all self-destructive. Nothing was ever done that was harmful to anybody but ourselves. I started cutting because I was going through a rough time with my mom. It was a release.
In the 9th grade, Natasha dropped out of school, and on her 17th birthday, she married Steve Cornett.
We had been friends for a while. It seemed like the logical thing to do.
But the marriage was short-lived when after about 6 months, Steve abruptly drove away and never returned.
It was awful. I just kind of caved in on myself.
After a brief trip to New Orleans a few weeks later, Natasha sought the company of a widening circle of friends. 17-year-old Karen Howell and Natasha were already close. 18-year-old Crystal Sturgill had been in Natasha's grade. Two guys who regularly joined the group were 19-year-old Edward Dean Mullins, a church-going friend with no prior record, and 20-year-old Joe Reisner. Natasha and her fellow outcasts would hang out at her mother's trailer.
I had been friends with Joe for a while, right before the crime occurred. Joe was dating Karen. Crystal needed a place to stay, and she was friends with Dean.
While drinking excessively and getting high, the friends would play games related to the occult.
Natasha started hearing voices and talking to people on the Ouija board. Her and Karen fed on each other, and it just kept, getting worse.
Teens who gravitate towards the dark side of the occult are simply doing so to find something that is more powerful than themselves.
Despite finding a growing range of activities to keep her busy, Natasha continued to feel stultified by the small town of Pikeville, Kentucky, and she longed to escape.
She wanted away from all the people that called her freak.
All I could think of is I need out, I need out, I need out. I can't breathe, I need out.
When Women Behind Bars continues.
Peter was being held by his mother when he was shot. He had his legs wrapped around her waist and his arms around her neck, and his back was to the gun. And he was struck by 2 bullets.
I screamed, please don't hurt them, please. Oh, it's Jason. I was like, why? He's like, stop crying.
By the time Natasha Cornett was 18, the high school dropout with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder had been in a failed marriage and was hell-bent on self-destruction. Authorities believed her to be the ringleader of a group of friends who spent their time at her mother's trailer, drinking, getting high, and dabbling in the occult. They all shared at least one prevailing yearning. They wanted to vanish from the small town where they grew up. As fate would have it, though, they would soon become notorious for shooting a devout family of 4 in which only the youngest child survived. The most recent addition to the circle was 14-year-old Jason Bryant.
Jason didn't make a huge impact on me. He seemed dangerous, like people pretend to be bad. I thought that was just his hook. He was the bad boy.
I got the feeling from people we talked to that he was not as controllable.
On April 4th, 1997, the group spent the night partying at one of their usual haunts, the Cawley Motel.
We had been hanging out and drinking. We went to the hotel room, I think on a Friday night.
There was some blood, and they had burnt some places in the carpet where they'd been burning candles.
Me and Karen just started cutting, and at first it was just to cut. And then I wanted to die. I thought eventually if I cut myself so many times, I would just bleed out.
The other people that had been there with them partying, their statements led us to believe that they'd been having a Satanism, a seance.
Mostly it was just me and Karen drinking each other's blood. We just didn't do seances.
Natasha told me they set the place on fire. The management was going to call the cops.
Karen had just got in trouble and she didn't want to go juvenile. And Jason just got out of juvenile and he didn't want to go back. And I was ready to run away at any given moment. So it just kind of came together. We were all going to run away.
Joe was on spring break from school and he was the only one with a car.
They wanted to go to New Orleans because that's the only place that I was familiar with. And I said I wouldn't go back down there without some kind of protection.
Natasha, according to her mom, had been raped in New Orleans, and she wasn't going to be raped again.
But according to the prosecution, Natasha and her gang had a different motive.
Prior to leaving, the defendants would watch Natural Born Killers. That movie depicts individuals who are carefree, killing people. There don't appear to be, from that movie, any consequences. They may have felt that there were going to be no consequences for their actions.
Natasha was the one that wanted Jason and the other kids to get a gun. And she also told me that they had plans to go carjacking.
The teens left Kentucky in a compact hatchback Chevy Citation and drove through the Virginia Panhandle, where they were pulled over for speeding. The officer did not search the car. If he had, he would have found 2 handguns acquired for protection. According to testimony, there was talk of ditching the Citation along the way and getting another car.
Based upon the evidence of what their stated purpose was the night before they left, they were preparing to leave Pikeville and go across country, robbing and killing people.
Driving south through eastern Tennessee, they pulled over at the Belton rest stop in Greene County, according to Natasha, for one reason only.
Karen needed to pee. That's it.
Among the people milling about the rest stop were the Lillylids, a family of Jehovah's Witnesses. 34-year-old Vidar, a native of Norway, and his wife Delphina had moved to Tennessee from Miami to raise their children, 6-year-old Tabitha and 2-year-old Peter, in a safer, more peaceful environment.
The Lillylids were a warm family, very caring, kind-hearted people.
Vidar worked as a bellman. His wife was a stay-at-home mother. They lived simply, walked most everywhere from work to church.
They had been to a religious gathering. They had stopped on their way home. And I think they were sort of proselytizing a little bit there at the rest area. It was just part of their religion that they go out and try and talk to people. They saw the defendant's unusual appearance. They might have appeared to need some discussion about the Lord.
Vidar and Delphina began to talk about their religion, and the group followed up with questions. Some of the teens invited the Lillylids over to the picnic area for a more private discussion. Natasha claims she and Karen followed to keep a close watch on things.
When I talked to Natasha and other people about what happened, they said that Joe Reisner went back to the car and got his gun and told her that something was going to happen.
As Natasha tells it, she had a bad feeling right from the start.
When Joe wanted to talk to a Jehovah's Witness about religion, things didn't add up. And then him and Jason walked off together. I told Karen something was wrong, and then he pulled out a gun.
Joseph Reisner described the abduction during the sentencing phase, and he was the one that actually pulled the gun.
Natasha says she tried to stop Joe, but there was no turning back. Joe pointed the loaded weapon at the Lillylid family and started making demands.
And he was just like, nothing's gonna happen. We just need your car. And all I could do was like look at them and apologize.
Vidar was fearful and immediately offered his wallet, said, take the car, take my money, please just don't hurt my family. Joe attempted to reassure him that he was not gonna hurt him.
They got in the van.
Crystal and Dean followed in the Chevy Citation. Natasha says she got in the van with the others, hoping to prevent things from getting worse.
I didn't think that the people that I was around could actually do anything bad. Even Jason. I thought I could stop something.
But authorities say it was Natasha who engineered the entire plan.
It became apparent from interviews in Kentucky and talking to a lot of their friends that Natasha was the one that was perceived by the group to have power to draw on demons and was the driving force in the group.
Natasha wanted to be more than just a leader. She wanted to give the orders to Karen, to Jason Bryant. Edward Mullins came from a very good home, but she manipulated him to do things for her.
The rest of them were following her and were drawn into this by her. She had the control to stop the situation at any time.
I think the whole time the Lilith felt like, oh, we'll probably get away, or we could talk them out of this, because they were saying, we know we're safe with you.
They left the interstate. It was abandoned road. Then they turned onto a dead-end road.
The Liliths were ordered out of the car when they got to Payne Hollow Road. Joe Reisner apparently told them to stand in a ditch.
Jason just pulled the gun up and pointed it at him. All I could see was rage on his face. And Joe walked away from it. And he was like, I can't do that. And I got in front of the gun and I was like, Jason, what are you doing? And he was just like, I'll shoot you. And he was cussing. Get the up out of the way. Get the out of the way. Move. Unless you want to die, move. I wouldn't move until he promised me that he at least would not hurt the kids. And I moved.
What happened next would become the source of enormous controversy about whether it had been planned or impulsive, and also who controlled the events that unfolded.
What Natasha told me is that Jason took the gun and shot Vidar first in the head, then Delphina, then went up to Tabitha and put the gun point blank to her.
Tabitha had been shot in the head. Peter was being held by his mother when he was shot. She was facing the gun, and she was holding Peter. He had his legs wrapped around her waist and his arms around her neck and was holding on to her so that his back was to the gun. And he was struck by 2 bullets.
And what I understood from Natasha is that Jason went back to the car, got another gun, and shot a number of more times, because there were 17 total shots. From friends, I've heard other things like Joe got involved and started shooting too. And that seems a little bit more plausible because of the way the shots were.
I didn't watch. I sat down in the van and just screamed, please don't hurt them, please don't hurt them. Ah, please don't hurt them, please don't hurt them. Oh, it's Jason. I was like, why? He's like, stop crying. And he just laughed.
But police believe that Natasha was more involved in the shootings than she admits.
I think Natasha put them up to it. I think that she instructed them how to fire the weapons in the manner that they were fired. And once it was done, they had to figure out how to get out and leave. When they got their car stuck, then they took the Little Lids van.
The teenagers drove over the victims' bodies as they left the area. They left their abandoned car and got on the interstate and left.
When Women Behind Bars continues.
One of the first things I remember is some attorney talking about his client. He says, Natasha Cornett has informed him that she is the daughter of Satan, and I just thought, something's wrong.
And later,
he ain't never gonna beat you again, okay? And I mean, I even have freedom again. I mean, I lost my life.
On April 6, 1997, Natasha Cornett and 5 friends took part in a massacre of a family of Jehovah's Witnesses. According to Natasha, she did not pull the trigger, but was too stunned to do anything except go along with her group.
After you witness something that atrocious, I didn't know what to do.
The alleged killers abandoned their Chevy Citation at the scene of the crime and made their getaway in the victim's van, headed towards Mexico through Douglas, Arizona.
The original plan, I think, was to go to New Orleans, and then it changed to Mexico when they got into trouble.
In the meantime, a local resident alerted the Greene County Sheriff's Department to the gunshots heard off of Payne Hollow Lane.
When I backed down the road, I looked over to the left, and that's when I seen the Little Lid family laying there on the bank. We knew that one of them was alive, little Peter, and the little girl was breathing. We got on the radio and called for EMS to come to assist us.
An emergency medical services crew arrived minutes later. There was no identification on either Vidar or Delphina Lilylid.
We found a pager on the mail. We were able to find out that a van was registered to them. But then the car that was left there was a Chevrolet Citation, and it was stripped of its identification.
Although the group had taken the Citation's license plates, they had left the vehicle identification number.
The VIN basically was useless without knowing what state it was. So we searched the car and we found one receipt that had been left behind from a store in Pikeville, Kentucky. And we knew now that the van that had left was most probably the Lily Lid van, and that these victims were probably victimized by one or more of the 6 people who occupied the citation.
A description of the van was broadcast nationwide while investigators went to Pikeville to interview the parents and friends of the group, including Natasha's mother. The group was considered armed and dangerous.
They had been down into Mexico, and as they were coming back through, the computers at the border had not been functioning, so that the border couldn't check on who was coming in and out. But just as that group came back in, the computers suddenly started working. And when they put the license tag into the system, they got a hit, and they were arrested there in Arizona.
Those defendants who were adults were informed that the state would seek the death penalty if convicted of the Lily Lid murders. Under the law, Karen Howell and Jason Bryant could not be charged with the death penalty since they were under 18 when the crime was committed. As Natasha and the other defendants arrived to be booked into jail, there was a standing room only crowd outside the jail on the streets and at the courthouse.
They wanted to get a look at these kids. They'd been heavily covered on television and newspapers, and their pictures had been plastered everywhere. They had begun to take on a larger-than-life status. They were brought up individually, 6 separate police cruisers. And the first one arrived. The crowd began to shout, "You murderers, you're gonna fry. Rot in jail, you baby killers."
As the state built their case against the defendants, each member of the group hired attorneys to represent them. At first, Eric Kahn was Natasha's attorney.
After Eric Kahn got started with the devil worship and the vampirism, it kept getting, worse and worse.
I didn't tell him that I even had any inclination towards that. All I knew was here was a lawyer saying that he wanted to represent me pro bono. At no point have I ever been a Satanist, ever.
I remember some attorney holding a press conference in Arizona about his client. He says, Natasha Cornett has informed him that she is the daughter of Satan, and I just thought, something's wrong.
As Natasha tells it, the damage to her case was irreparable.
Once something like that's said, you can't just take it back.
Kahn was replaced by Stacy Street as Natasha's attorney. This is the first time he has agreed to an interview about the case.
We had to put a stop to the bad publicity. All death penalty cases are scary because the state can literally kill your client.
It was the prosecution's contention that based on the evidence, all 6 defendants were involved in the murders and should be tried together.
Each one of these killers took an individual trophy from their victims and kept it attached to a chain, in the wallet.
Karen Howell had Peter's Social Security card. One had Hello Kitty merchandise and was identified as having belonged to Tabitha. Natasha Cornett, she had Tabitha's Social Security card in her wallet.
The prosecution also alleged that Natasha was not only involved in the shootings, but was the ringleader as well.
They looked up to Natasha. She would get the motel rooms. She had ways of getting those drugs there, and the other kids would follow.
It was always Natasha Cornett, the ringleader, the daughter of Satan. Average person on the street probably couldn't name any of the other individuals, but they knew Natasha Cornett. I had to blame Eric Kahn for that.
But right before the trial was to begin, District Attorney General Barkley Bell offered the defendants a plea bargain, based on the evidence that a key witness for the prosecution would be compromised.
We were very concerned that the proof might focus on the juveniles as being the shooters. Juveniles can't get the death penalty. And if they couldn't get the death penalty, we were concerned that no one else would get the death penalty either. What we reached was an agreement that we'd have a hearing.
In exchange for pleading guilty, the 4 adults would be exempt from receiving the death penalty. All 6 defendants would be heard at the same sentencing hearing. Stacy Street discussed Natasha's options with her, including a last-minute plea deal offered by the prosecution.
The offer has to be accepted by that day. It's all or nothing. Everyone has to take it. We were very clear with her that if she accepted this deal as young as she was at the time, that she would probably spend the rest of her life in prison.
Natasha and the others accepted the deal. All pled guilty to 3 charges of first-degree murder and 1 charge of attempted murder. There was a possibility that they might all receive the same sentence. The defendants had differing stories about who pulled the trigger and if there was one shooter or several.
You had 6 defendants, each of whom was interested in their own welfare, so you had stories that contradicted each other. Natasha and Karen wept a lot. They expressed a lot of remorse at the fact that people had been killed, that their child had been left an orphan. At the same time, they denied having anything to do with the guns being shot.
I don't think I have any choice in the case, Ms. Cornett, but to sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
It's been my position that that was a type of initiation into that group, that everybody had to participate in the shooting. Life without parole is a death penalty. They come out in a box. It just takes longer to impose the final penalty.
She wasn't the shooter. She got the same thing as the shooter.
I went to the women's prison and interviewed Natasha and Karen and Crystal. I explained that Peter was in counseling, and Natasha became emotional and asked me, could Peter walk yet? How was he emotionally? And she wept and asked me then to relay to the family her deep regret and her wish that he would make a full recovery.
At 30 years old, Natasha is serving her sentence at the Tennessee Prison for Women. She is a licensed cosmetologist and has earned her high school equivalency diploma.
11 years, I'm an entirely different person. I hope to gain as much education as I possibly can here.
She and her mother hope that teens who have similar problems know that they can get help.
You don't have to resort to negative things like cutting or trying to die if nobody is helping you. Go on a website, talk to people.
Peter Lillylid is now a teenager and lives with relatives.
Peter made amazing progress at the time the shooting happened.
Natasha has a message for him.
Peter deserves a better life, and for April 6th to never happened.
Next up on Women Behind Bars.
No thought went through my head. I just grabbed the knife. When I grabbed the knife, I swung it.
For more information about Women Behind Bars, go to WeTV.com. On March 23, 2007, LaSonya Larry, a crack addict with a turbulent history of domestic altercations, fatally stabbed her boyfriend, Shedrid Burney.
LaSonya will cut somebody in a minute, but I don't see her just brutally murdering somebody. I don't.
LaSonya fled and spent the night smoking crack cocaine. She did not call 911 or contact police. Shedrid's body was discovered the next day.
There's a pattern of doing drugs and stabbing all her boyfriends, and she was going to play the role of the victim and say she did this in self-defense.
I regret it, but I don't even have tears to cry. I don't, because he's beating me so much.
I don't believe she intended to kill him. I believe she intended to hurt him and figured it'd just be like all the rest. She'd cut him, he wouldn't prosecute, that'd be the end of it.
Did LaSonya Larry stab her boyfriend in self-defense? Or was she a violent drug addict who was out of control? As a child, LaSonya knew her father Willie as a generous man.
Dad would always bring gifts every time he come to grandmother's house.
But her mother, Claudette, was not as predictable.
Claudette, she was on drugs. She was in the streets. She was living with different guys, here and there.
LaSonya's childhood was playful, but an accident in her youth damaged her eyesight on one eye.
We were playing on the railroad tracks, and when we both turned around, some boys were throwing rocks, and that rock hit her in the left eye.
LaSonya was left partially blind, but the pain from that incident was overshadowed by Claudette's absence in her life. As a young adolescent, LaSonya became defiant and would stay out late searching for her mother.
She couldn't always find Claudette. When she couldn't find her, she'd come and she'd just go in the room and cry.
She used to tell me her mom was dead.
By 7th grade, LaSonya started skipping school because she was losing hope that she would ever be with Claudette.
She said her mother wasn't there, so she felt like no one else cared. But they did care.
The young rebel missed almost the entire year of 7th grade and never went back.
When I first stopped going to school, I was basically stealing shoes, stealing little short sets, hanging out at other people's house, doing nothing.
By her teens, LaSonya was hustling and turning tricks.
I think she was just trying to follow her mother's steps.
LaSonya was 15 when she became a mother. She named the baby Janelle.
It was wonderful. I wanted to do everything for her. In the first 2 years, it was like that, and then I want to go back and hang with the boys and run the streets.
In order for LaSonya to make room for her social activities, Janelle was left with relatives, just as LaSonya had been when she was a little girl.
To me, she was a good mother. She took care of her, but when she wasn't there, she was, to me, a bad mother.
LaSonya again became a fixture on the streets, but denied rumors of her drug use.
I asked her about it. She said, girl, don't listen to them. They lying. They think I'm on drugs. I ain't on no drugs.
By her late teens, she landed in prison for the first time on charges of possession and sale of crack cocaine.
I got a year and a day in prison, and I did like 2 months or so. And I was like, this all? I got more defiant.
The former convict followed her first prison sentence with more arrests related to cocaine.
I just always stayed just on that one path, and it was the path of destruction.
By the time LaSonya turned 22, her mother had passed away, and LaSonya's drug use escalated.
The day that we buried her, I would put the crack on the can the way I've seen people smoke it, and I've been smoking crack ever since, until my arrest.
LaSonya would spend the next several years turning to reckless sex to support her drug habit.
I got 6 girls, all of them from different mans, 3 of them addicted to drugs.
Except for Janelle, LaSonya did not see much of her daughters. They were either cared for by relatives or adopted. The childless mother could not find a safe haven for herself and admits to creating a chaotic environment in her relationships as well.
If there wasn't a guy abusing me, at times I felt like, well, this man don't love me.
Physical fights with boyfriends like Alex Grimsley became common.
LaSonya would say she wants this and want that, and then I would say no, I'm not going to get it, and then that would start an argument right there.
I'm not gonna sit here and say I was an angel, but I never initiated.
LaSonya cut me in my head with a box cutter. She gave me 17 staples because I told her no, that I wasn't going to get any more drugs for her.
She's known for cutting. And that's the truth.
Alex and 2 other men filed aggravated battery reports against the hostile addict, but she was never formally charged. The cycle repeated until Shedrid Burney entered her life.
He was just everything that I hadn't had. He was supportive, he was caring, he was romantic.
Mutual friend Robert Barnes liked to go fishing with Shedrid, who everyone knew as Rat.
Rat did anything for anybody, without any strings attached.
But LaSonya's daughter Janelle believes there were conditions to the relationship.
Whenever he wanted sex, he gave her money. She went out and got her drugs. She came back in the house, she cleaned, cooked. It was basically a living prostitute.
LaSonya says she had real feelings for Rat. It was an experience she was not accustomed to having.
Cedric provided that security. I really started to feel something right then, but I think I fell in love with him about 2 or 3 months.
But LaSonya had been warned. A friend in the neighborhood told her to stay away from Rat.
She said, that's a bad man that you with. He have a history of beating on women. Lo and behold, 4 or 5 months later, I'm at Rat's house. I'm living with him now, and the beating starts.
When Women Behind Bars continues.
I was like, well, Rat, I'm not having sex, it's simple as that. So he slapped me.
LaSonya Larry, a middle school dropout and drug addict, was in and out of jail most of her adult life. After what she calls several abusive relationships, she met Shedrid Burney, an older man friends called Rat, who tried to help her.
I think Rat had got LaSonya off of drugs for a while. She was looking different, and she just seemed like she was so happy.
I don't think they were happy. That's just put on something, to show people that they were happy in front of other people.
LaSonya says friends did not know what happened when she was alone with Rat.
He would just beat me, kick me, stomp me. Cedric broke my nose once.
And the alleged abuse came in different forms.
He would always try to knock my self-esteem down, always. I never had a problem with my looks. I had a pretty smile. I think I had pretty eyes. I never let him get my self-esteem down, because that was that defiant in me.
LaSonya continued to stay with Rat and found comfort in something familiar, crack cocaine.
She wasn't ready to give up the drugs. The drug is a disease, it's a sickness.
When I relapsed, I think I really dug a hole and got in then, because I really didn't care then.
By 2006, LaSonya and Rat each made domestic disturbance calls to police, but with nowhere else to go, she kept returning to the house after each dispute.
He comes home, it's about 5 o'clock in the evening, and I wanted some blue crabs. And I was like, can you go up to the market and get me some crabs? And he was like, you is a crab. So I started laughing at him.
Despite an argument the night before, Rat got LaSonya the crabs and some beer. After he prepared the meal for her, he took a bath.
And then he came back out and he was standing there naked in front of me. He was like, you wanna have sex? I was like, no, I'm not having no sex.
Rat got dressed, but as LaSonya tells it, he was upset that even after he made her dinner and got her beer, LaSonya had refused to have sex with him.
I was like, well, Rat, I'm not having sex, just simple as that. So he slapped me. And I dropped my head back down and I went to eat some more crabs. And he slapped me again. And I looked up at him. I had tears coming out of my eyes. I said, I'm just really sick of you putting your hands on me. But before I can go out the front door, he had already went out. He come back with this long piece of antenna-like thing, and he hit me with it right across my neck.
LaSonya says she snatched it from Rat and he grabbed her. It was then that she saw a knife on a small table.
There was no thought went through my head. I just grabbed the knife. I swung it. I don't know if I hit him in the shoulder. I don't know if I hit him in the chest. But when it made contact with him, he said, "Oh, B, you done effed up now." And I knew then I better leave.
When LaSonya left the house, she claims Rat was still alive. After throwing the knife in a lawn service truck, she went to her old neighborhood and got high.
I knew he was hurt, but I didn't know how bad. I just kept asking everybody, y'all seen Rat? They was like, no, so I really didn't think anything of it.
Rat never came to find her, and LaSonya spent the night in a crack house.
I'm reporting that someone may be stabbed in the house.
Why do you think someone's been stabbed?
Yeah, a friend of his, he had got a phone call. His nephew called him and saying that there's a possibility that he had got stabbed by his wife.
When I woke up, I just happened to look out of the window, and there was police tape right by my front door. And there was a crowd starting to gather, and the police had blocked off the road.
Shedrid Burney's body was found on the floor in the master bedroom.
It was a stab wound to the chest. Penetrated, I believe, 3 to 4 inches in a downward motion.
word traveled quickly that Rat was dead.
It was an absolute surprise because this is a neighborhood where nothing ever happens.
Officers immediately looked for LaSonya. She was found and arrested at a crack house on an outstanding warrant.
She kept asking, is that all this is about? Is that all this is about? And kept prying to see if there's anything else.
Detectives asked LaSonya what happened.
Me and Rat, we had an argument yesterday, and I walked out the house. That was yesterday afternoon.
There's a little more to it than just walking out of the house. What did you do to him?
I don't know what I did to him.
You know Rat's dead.
What?
You know Rat's dead.
No.
He's dead.
At first, she was denying anything happened until we started laying out the facts of what we knew about the phone calls, how he was found, and eventually she told us what happened.
I regret it, but I don't even have tears to cry. I don't, because he's beating me so much.
Listen to me. He's never gonna beat you again. Okay?
And I mean, I even have freedom again. I mean, I lost my life.
LaSonya gave detectives a detailed confession.
She didn't really have anything good to say about him. She accepted responsibility and gave her version of what happened, painting herself to be a bigger victim than we could find ever being recorded.
Investigators knew LaSonya had a history of violence. They focused on her intentions that night.
Have you ever talked about, man, I got nothing else to do, I'm gonna have to kill this guy?
No, but I've said to myself, you know what I'm saying, I don't know what else I'm gonna do. I never thought about actually killing this man. That'd be the last thing I would want to do.
I don't believe she intended to kill him. I believe she intended to hurt him and figured it'd just be like all the rest. She'd cut him, he wouldn't prosecute.
If I could take it all back, I would do it different. There's nothing in this world that I think is worse than taking another human being's life.
LaSonya was charged with second-degree murder.
Second-degree murder is a life felony. The maximum punishment that you can get is life in prison.
I didn't want to go to trial, and so I just went ahead and I took a plea bargain.
Knowing that she got at least 18 years with her violent past, that makes me feel like I got the job done.
LaSonya's daughter, Janelle, had been getting to know her mother better before she went to prison.
I can't cry no more, really. I'm used to her not being in my life. I'm used to her being in the jail and the prison and everything. When I need somebody to talk to, when I'm just going through some things, I don't have nobody to talk to. It just makes me mad because it's like you could have got out of this situation way before it even came to this point.
Janelle started to follow the familiar path of Claudette and LaSonya, but today she is leading a different life.
I told my mom, I said, Mom, I'm going to school and I'm going to get me a job. I got sisters that need a role model in their life and I got to be there for them. I want to be better than you and better than what you did.
LaSonya, who will be released from prison in 16 years, says she will change too.
They're gonna look back, they're not gonna see me as being a murderer or doing 18 years in prison. They're gonna see me as doing something to change somebody's life somewhere. I know this. I know it without a shadow of a doubt, I know it.